"Julian," she called out, her voice sharp with that particular tone that meant I was about to get lectured. "We need to talk. Now." I saved my work and walked downstairs, finding her in the living room, still wearing her expensive lawyer suit and holding a glass of wine that cost more than most people spend on groceries. Emily worked at Hartwell & Associates, one of Portland's most prestigious law firms, specializing in corporate litigation. She made twice what I did, which she also never let me forget. "What's up?" I asked, settling into my favorite armchair, the one piece of furniture in the house that Emily hadn't redecorated to match her Pinterest boards. She took a long sip of wine, studying me like I was a hostile witness. "I've been thinking about our relationship, Julian, about where we're going." Here it comes, I thought. The speech she'd probably been rehearsing in her BMW during the drive home from whatever expensive restaurant she'd been at with her girlfriends. "We've been married 7 years, she continued, pacing in front of the fireplace like she was addressing a jury. 7 years, and what do we have to show for it? No kids, no real plans for the future. I'm 31 years old, Julian. I can't waste any more time." "Waste time?" I repeated, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. "Is that what our marriage is to you? A waste of time?" Emily waved her hand dismissively. "Don't be dramatic. I'm talking about commitment. Real commitment. I want you to propose to me properly, with a ring, a real ring, not some placeholder promise about someday when we have more money." I stared at her. We'd talked about marriage. We were already married. But apparently, Emily wanted the whole production, the engagement ring, the big wedding, the social media announcement that would make her friends jealous. "Emily, we're already married. We had a ceremony at City Hall." "That wasn't a wedding," she snapped. "That was a formality. I'm talking about a real proposal, a real ring, a real wedding that my parents can be proud of. I want you to propose to me by the end of next month, or I'm done. I'm not going to spend my 30s waiting for you to grow up." The ultimatum hung in the air between us like smoke from a house fire. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and realized I was seeing a stranger. When had she become this person? This demanding, entitled woman who measured love in carrots and Instagram likes? "And if I don't?" I asked quietly. Emily's smile was cold as winter in Maine. "Then I guess we'll both know where we stand, won't we?" She finished her wine and headed upstairs, leaving me alone in the living room with the echoes of her ultimatum. I sat there for a long time, listening to the old house settle around me, thinking about foundations and cracks and how sometimes the only way to fix a structure is to tear it down and start over. But Emily had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated the quiet guy with the blueprints. She thought she held all the cards because her family had money, because she made more than me, because she looked good in expensive suits, and knew how to work a room full of lawyers. What she didn't know was that architects are trained to see structural weaknesses. We know how to identify load-bearing walls and how to remove them without bringing down the whole building. We understand leverage, pressure points, and how small changes can have massive consequences. Emily wanted a proposal by the end of next month? Fine. I'd give her a proposal she'd never forget. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. Emily had already left for her early morning yoga class, another new addition to her routine that had started about 3 months ago. Funny thing about yoga classes, they don't usually require you to dress like you're going to a nightclub. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, looking out at our backyard where the maple trees were turning brilliant shades of red and gold. October in Maine is beautiful, but there's always an underlying sense of things dying, of winter coming whether you're ready or not. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark Patterson, my business partner and one of the few people in this world I actually trusted. Mark was an ex-Marine who'd done 2 tours in Afghanistan before coming home and deciding to build things instead of blowing them up. He had a talent for seeing through people's bullshit that came in handy in our line of work. "Coffee? Got something to show you." 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Mark at Grind Coffee, a local place that served decent coffee and minded their own business. Mark slid a manila envelope across the table. "You're not going to like this," he said. Inside the envelope were photographs. Emily getting into a BMW that wasn't hers. Emily walking into the Eastland Park Hotel with a man I didn't recognize. Emily kissing that same man in the hotel parking lot. The man was tall, athletic, wearing the kind of expensive casual clothes that screamed, "Trust fund baby." He had perfectly styled hair and the kind of confident smile that comes from never having to worry about money or consequences. "Who is he?" I asked, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "Derek Halston. Works at Pinnacle Financial downtown. His family owns half the commercial real estate in southern Maine. Drives a Porsche, lives in a penthouse apartment, and according to my research, has a reputation for going after married women." Mark had done his homework. He'd even found Derek's social media profiles, which were exactly what you'd expect. Gym selfies, expensive dinners, photos from ski trips to Aspen and beach vacations in the Caribbean. "How long?" I asked. "Based on what I could find, about 3 months, maybe longer." 3 months. Right around the time Emily started her new fitness routine and began caring about her appearance again. Right around the time she started working late and going to mysterious yoga classes. "There's more," Mark said, pulling out his phone. "I had drinks with Riley O'Connor last night. You remember Riley from high school?" I nodded. Riley worked as a bartender at Murphy's, an upscale Irish pub downtown that was popular with the lawyer and finance crowd. Riley's seen them together. Says they come in every Thursday night, sit in the back corner booth, act like they're discussing business. But Riley's got eyes, and he knows what business looks like versus what cheating looks like. I studied the photos again, feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. It wasn't heartbreak. Not exactly. It was more like the feeling you get when you realize a building you've been working on has fundamental structural problems that can't be fixed with cosmetic repairs. "What are you going to do?" Mark asked. "I'm going to give her exactly what she asked for," I said, sliding the photos back into the envelope. "A proposal she'll never forget." Mark grinned. "Need any help with the planning?" "Actually, yes. But first, I need to do some more research. Emily thinks she's so smart, but she's made some crucial mistakes. She's left evidence, digital footprints, and she's underestimated exactly how thorough an architect can be when he puts his mind to something." That afternoon, while Emily was at work, I went home and started my investigation in earnest. Our house had good bones, solid foundation, well-built structure, but it also had secrets, like the crawl space above the master bedroom that provided access to the attic storage, like the fact that Emily always left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she got ready for work, like the fact that she'd never bothered to change the password on our shared tablet. I spent 2 hours going through Emily's digital life, and what I found was even worse than I'd expected. Text messages to Derek that made my stomach turn. Hotel receipts charged to her credit card. Photos she'd taken of our bedroom, our bed, with captions like, "Can't wait to show you where I sleep." But the worst part was the group chat she had with her friends Sophie and Marina. Sophie was Emily's best friend from law school, an Instagram influencer who made a living posting photos of her expensive lifestyle. Marina worked at Emily's firm and had always struck me as the type of person who smiled to your face while sharpening knives behind your back. The group chat was called Girl Power, and it was full of messages about Derek, about how much money he had, about how Emily deserved better than boring Julian with his boring job and his boring life. They'd been planning Emily's exit strategy for weeks, discussing how to maximize her share of our assets, how to play the victim if I got angry. There was even a message from 2 days ago. "Julian's so clueless. He has no idea what's coming. This is going to be easier than I thought." I screenshotted everything and uploaded it to a secure cloud drive that Emily didn't know about. Then I sat back in my chair and smiled for the first time in months. Emily thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. But architects don't just design buildings. We design systems. We think about load distribution, stress points, and cascade failures. We understand how to apply pressure in exactly the right place to bring down an entire structure. Emily wanted a proposal. She was going to get one. But first, I was going to systematically dismantle every support system she had, every advantage she thought she held, every relationship she'd taken for granted. By the time I was done, she'd be standing alone in the rubble of her own making, wondering how everything had gone so wrong so fast. The best part? She'd never see it coming. I spent the next 2 weeks planning like my life depended on it, which, in a way, it did. Emily had given me until the end of the month to propose, and I intended to honor that timeline, just not in the way she expected. The key to any good architectural project is preparation. You don't just start building. You survey the land, test the soil, understand the environment you're working in. So I did my homework. I learned Derek's schedule. He worked out at an expensive gym downtown every morning at 6, grabbed coffee at the same pretentious place that charged $8 for a latte, and usually had lunch at one of 3 upscale restaurants. He was a creature of habit, which made him predictable. I learned Emily's real schedule too. Her yoga classes were actually meetings with Derek at his penthouse apartment. Her late nights at the office were dinners at expensive restaurants where they thought they wouldn't be seen. Her girls' nights with Sophie and Marina were strategy sessions about how to leave me with as little as possible. But most importantly, I learned about their weaknesses. Derek was arrogant and impulsive, the kind of guy who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. Emily was image-obsessed and controlling, desperate for social approval. Sophie was a gossip who couldn't keep a secret if her life depended on it. Marina was jealous and opportunistic, always looking for a way to climb the ladder. Every weakness was a pressure point. Every pressure point was an opportunity. On the last Friday of October, I put my plan into motion. I made reservations at 4th Street, the most expensive restaurant in Portland, the kind of place where Emily loved to be seen. I told her I had something important to discuss, something about our future. She spent 2 hours getting ready, choosing an outfit that probably cost more than most people's rent. She did her makeup with the precision of a surgeon and wore the diamond earrings her parents had given her for law school graduation. "You look beautiful," I told her as we walked into the restaurant, and I meant it. Emily was objectively stunning, tall, blonde, with the kind of classical features that looked good in photographs. It was her personality that had turned ugly. We were seated at a prime table in the center of the dining room, exactly where Emily liked to sit so people could see her. She ordered the most expensive wine on the menu and smiled at me like she'd already won. "So," she said, cutting into her $40 steak, "what did you want to talk about?" I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emily's eyes lit up, and I could see her mentally calculating the size and quality of the ring inside, already planning her Instagram announcement. "Emily," I said, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear, "we've been together for 7 years. She nodded eagerly, her phone already in her hand, ready to capture the moment. 7 years of marriage, and in all that time, you've taught me so much about commitment, about loyalty, about what it really means to love someone." The restaurant was getting quieter as people started to notice what was happening. A proposal at 4th Street was exactly the kind of thing that would end up on social media, the kind of romantic gesture that would make other women jealous. I stood up and got down on one knee, holding the velvet box. Emily's smile was so bright it could have powered the city. "Emily Carter," I said, my voice carrying across the now silent restaurant. "You gave me an ultimatum. You said I had until the end of this month to propose or you were done." She nodded, tears of joy starting to form in her eyes. I opened the velvet box. Inside, instead of a ring, was a flash drive. So, here's my proposal, I continued, my voice still carrying to every corner of the restaurant. I propose that you take this flash drive, which contains screenshots of every text message you've sent to Derek Halston over the past 3 months, including the photos you took of our bedroom, and I propose that you use it to explain to your parents, your friends, and your colleagues exactly what kind of person you really are. The silence in the restaurant was deafening. Emily's face went from joy to confusion to horror in the space of about 3 seconds. I propose, I continued standing up, that you find somewhere else to sleep tonight, because the locks on our house have been changed. I propose that you call Derek and ask if you can move into his penthouse, since you've already been spending so much time there. Emily's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Around us, phones were coming out. People were starting to whisper and point. And finally, I said, dropping the velvet box on the table, I propose that next time you want to cheat on your husband, you don't leave your tablet unlocked on the kitchen counter where he can read all your messages. I dropped $100 bill on the table, enough to cover dinner and tip, and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Emily sitting alone at the table with a box containing evidence of her own betrayal. By the time I got home, the video was already online. Someone had filmed the whole thing and posted it to TikTok with the caption, "When proposals go wrong." It had 3,000 views and climbing. My phone was buzzing with calls from Emily, but I ignored them. Instead, I poured myself a glass of the good whiskey I'd been saving for a special occasion and sat in my favorite chair, watching the maple leaves fall in the backyard. Phase 1 was complete. Emily's perfect image was cracked. Her social media presence was about to become a liability, and her support system was about to discover exactly who they'd been supporting. But this was just the beginning. Emily had spent months planning to destroy my life and take everything I'd worked for. Now it was my turn to show her what real planning looked like. She'd wanted a proposal she'd never forget. Mission accomplished. The fallout from the restaurant proposal was immediate and spectacular. By Saturday morning, the video had been shared across every social media platform, with commentary ranging from savage to she deserved it to relationship goals. Emily's phone was probably buzzing nonstop, but she wasn't my problem anymore. Mark showed up at my door around 10 a.m. with coffee and bagels from the good place downtown. "You magnificent bastard," he said, grinning as he handed me a cup. "Have you seen the comments on that video? You're like a folk hero for married guys everywhere." We sat on my front porch, watching Mrs. Dorsey across the street pretend to water her plants, while obviously trying to eavesdrop on our conversation. Mrs. Dorsey was 73 years old, had lived in the neighborhood for 40 years, and knew everyone's business better than they knew it themselves. She was also, as I'd recently discovered, a valuable ally. "Mrs. Dorsey," I called out. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" She abandoned all pretense and walked directly over to my porch. "Julian Carter, you've got the whole neighborhood talking. Is it true what they're saying about Emily?" I'd learned over the years that Mrs. Dorsey responded well to being treated like the neighborhood intelligence network she actually was. "I'm afraid so, Mrs. Dorsey. I found out she's been seeing someone else. Derek Halston, you might have seen him around. Tall guy, drives a silver Porsche." Her eyes lit up with the joy of confirmed gossip. "Oh, I've seen him all right. Parked in your driveway 3 times in the past month when you were at work. I thought it was strange, Emily bringing men home during the day, but I didn't want to assume anything." Mark nearly choked on his coffee. Mrs. Dorsey had photographic evidence of Emily's affair, and she'd been sitting on it for weeks. "You didn't happen to take any pictures, did you?" I asked casually. "Well," she said, trying to look innocent, "I might have a few photos from when I was testing my new camera. You know how these digital cameras are, sometimes they just go off accidentally." 20 minutes later, I had a collection of time-stamped photos showing Derek's car in my driveway, Derek walking up to my front door, and Derek leaving my house looking very satisfied with himself. Mrs. Dorsey had inadvertently documented Emily's affair better than a private investigator. "You're building a case," Mark observed after Mrs. Dorsey had gone back to her gardening. "I'm building something," I agreed. "Emily thinks this is over because she's been humiliated, but humiliation fades. What I'm building is permanent." My phone rang. Riley O'Connor. "Julian, you crazy son of a jerk!" Riley's voice was full of admiration. "That video is everywhere. Half my customers last night were talking about it." "I hope you're not calling to lecture me about public scenes," I said. "Are you kidding? I'm calling to tell you that your cheating wife and her boyfriend were in my bar last night, having what looked like a very intense conversation. She was crying, he was looking pissed off, and they left separately. Thought you might want to know." This was interesting. Trouble in paradise already? "Thanks, Riley. I owe you a drink." "Actually, you owe me information. What's your next move? Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like just the opening act." Riley knew me well enough to understand that I didn't do anything halfway. If I was going to destroy Emily's life, I was going to be thorough about it. Let's just say that Emily's about to learn the difference between a tactical strike and a strategic campaign. After I hung up, Mark looked at me with something between admiration and concern. "You know she's not going to take this lying down, right? Emily's got resources, connections. Her parents have money and influence." "Her parents also have reputations to protect," I pointed out. "Old money families don't like scandals, and Emily's about to become a very public scandal." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I answered it on speaker. "Julian Carter?" The voice was crisp, professional, with the kind of authority that comes from expensive legal training. "Speaking." "This is Victoria Hartwell from Hartwell and Associates. I represent Emily Carter. We need to discuss your recent behavior and its impact on my client's professional reputation." Emily had sent her boss to threaten me. This was either desperation or stupidity, and I wasn't sure which. "Ms. Hartwell," I said pleasantly, "I'm not sure what you think we need to discuss. I proposed to my wife in a public restaurant. Everything I said was true, and everything I showed her belonged to both of us as married partners. If that's damaged her professional reputation, perhaps she should have considered that before conducting an affair." There was a pause. "Mr. Carter, I think you misunderstand the situation. Emily is a valued member of our firm, and we don't appreciate our employees being subjected to public humiliation. Then perhaps you should speak to Emily about her conduct, not me about mine. But since you've called, I should mention that I have documentation of Emily using firm resources, including her company credit card, to facilitate her extramarital affair. I'd hate for that information to become public." Another pause, longer this time. When Victoria Hartwell spoke again, her tone was considerably less threatening. "Perhaps we should all take some time to cool down and approach this more reasonably." "I think that's an excellent idea," I agreed. "Give Emily my regards." I hung up and looked at Mark, who was staring at me like I'd just grown a second head. "Did you just threaten Emily's boss?" "I didn't threaten anyone. I simply provided information about potential misuse of company resources. Emily charged hotel rooms to her corporate credit card, Mark. That's not just adultery, that's grounds for termination." Mark whistled low. "You really have thought of everything, haven't you?" "Not everything, but I was getting there." Emily had built her life on a foundation of image, connections, and other people's money. She'd never had to face real consequences for her actions because there had always been someone to bail her out, someone to smooth things over, someone to make problems disappear. But I was about to remove every safety net she'd ever had, one by one, until she was standing alone with nothing but the consequences of her own choices. The best part was that she was going to help me do it. Emily was predictable, arrogant, entitled, and convinced that she was smarter than everyone around her. She was going to make mistakes, and I was going to be ready for every single one of them. Phase 2 was about to begin. By Monday morning, Emily's world was already showing cracks. The restaurant video had gone viral over the weekend, racking up over 50,000 views and spawning dozens of reaction videos and commentary pieces. Emily's Instagram account, which she'd used to carefully curate an image of professional success and relationship goals, was flooded with comments ranging from supportive to savage. I knew this because Sophie, Emily's best friend and social media guru, had made the mistake of posting a supportive message about the situation. Her post, which was meant to paint Emily as the victim of a cruel public humiliation, had backfired spectacularly when people started sharing screenshots of Emily's own social media posts from the past few months. Posts that now looked like evidence of her double life. Mark met me for lunch at a small cafe near my office, bringing news from his own intelligence network. "Marina's making moves," he reported, sliding a folder across the table. "My friend Dave works IT at Hartwell & Associates. Says Marina requested access to Emily's client files this morning, claiming she needed to provide continuity of service while Emily deals with her personal issues." This was perfect. Marina had always been jealous of Emily's success, and now she saw an opportunity to advance her own career by stepping into the chaos Emily had created. "What about Derek?" I asked. "That's where it gets interesting. Apparently Derek's family is not happy about the negative attention. His father called him into a meeting this morning. Word is the Halston family is very concerned about their reputation being associated with adultery and public scandals. The Halston family had built their wealth over 3 generations, and old money families understood that reputations were more valuable than bank accounts. Derek had probably never faced real consequences for his actions, because his family had always been able to make problems disappear with money and influence. But this problem was too public, too documented, too viral to simply buy off. My phone buzzed with a text from Riley. "Your girl and her boyfriend are here. Looks like they're having a fight. Want me to keep my ears open?" I texted back, "Absolutely." 20 minutes later, Riley called with an update. "They're gone, but not before putting on quite a show." She was crying, saying something about how this was all his fault, how he promised her things would be different. He was telling her she needed to manage the situation and stop being so emotional. It ended with her throwing her drink at him and storming out. The alliance was cracking. Emily had probably expected Derek to support her through the scandal, maybe even to make some grand romantic gesture that would redeem the situation. Instead, she was learning that Derek was exactly the kind of man who would sleep with a married woman but wouldn't stand by her when things got difficult. That afternoon, I got a call that confirmed my suspicions about how quickly Emily's support network was dissolving. "Julian, this is Sophie." Emily's best friend sounded nervous, which was unusual for someone who made a living being confident on camera. "Sophie, I'm surprised to hear from you. I wanted to talk to you about Emily, about what happened at the restaurant." "What about it?" There was a pause. "Look, I know you're angry, and I understand why, but Emily's my friend, and she's really struggling right now. The video, the comments, the attention, it's destroying her." "Sophie," I said gently, "Emily made her choices. I didn't force her to have an affair. I didn't force her to give me an ultimatum. I didn't force her to leave evidence of her betrayal all over her digital devices. She created this situation. But the public humiliation was Emily's choice too. She chose the restaurant. She chose to make our relationship about public gestures and social media moments. She just didn't expect the gesture to go the way it did." Another pause. "There's something else. Emily asked me to call you. She wants to meet, to talk about working things out." I almost laughed. Emily was panicking, realizing that her perfect plan had backfired completely, and now she wanted to negotiate. But she'd made a crucial mistake. She'd sent Sophie to do it, which meant she was already showing weakness to her closest ally. "Tell Emily that if she wants to talk to me, she can call me herself. And Sophie? You might want to think carefully about how closely you want to be associated with this situation. Your brand is built on aspirational content, and Emily's story isn't very aspirational right now. I hung up, knowing that I'd just planted a seed of doubt in Sophie's mind. Sophie's entire career depended on her image as someone who had her life together, someone worth following and envying. Being associated with a cheating scandal wasn't good for that brand. Sure enough, within an hour, Sophie had deleted her supportive post about Emily and posted a generic motivational quote about focusing on positive energy. That evening, Mrs. Dorsey knocked on my door with a casserole and more intelligence. "That woman came by this afternoon," she reported, settling into my kitchen like she owned the place. "Emily. She was with a locksmith, trying to get into the house." "What did you do?" Mrs. Dorsey smiled with the satisfaction of someone who'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. "I told the locksmith that there'd been some confusion, that you were the homeowner and you'd already changed the locks for security reasons. I showed him the property records on my phone. Did you know you can look those up online now? Amazing what technology can do." Emily's name wasn't on the deed. Her parents had helped with the down payment, but I'd been the one to qualify for the mortgage, the one to sign the paperwork, the one to make the payments for 7 years. Emily had assumed she had equal claim to the house, but legally, she was wrong. The locksmith left, and Emily sat in her car for about 20 minutes, making phone calls. She looked very upset. "I bet she did." Mrs. Dorsey leaned forward conspiratorially. "There's something else. I've been talking to the other neighbors, and we've all noticed the same thing. Emily's been different lately. Secretive, sneaky. We all thought something was going on, but nobody wanted to say anything. The neighborhood intelligence network had been watching Emily's affair unfold in real time, and now they were all eager to share what they'd observed. It was like having a dozen witnesses to corroborate everything I already knew. By the time Mrs. Dorsey left, I had a complete picture of Emily's afternoon. She'd tried to get back into the house and failed. She'd called her parents, her lawyer, and probably Derek, looking for support and solutions. She'd driven around the neighborhood for an hour, probably trying to work up the courage to approach me directly. But Emily had never learned how to handle situations where she didn't hold all the advantages. She'd never had to face consequences without someone to bail her out. She'd never been in a position where her money, her connections, and her looks couldn't solve her problems. She was about to learn that some problems can't be fixed with privilege. Some mistakes have permanent consequences. And some people, when you push them far enough, push back harder than you ever imagined possible. The foundation of Emily's perfect life was cracking, and I was just getting started. 3 days later, Emily made her move. She'd clearly spent the time since the restaurant incident regrouping, calling in favors and planning her counterattack. What she hadn't counted on was that I'd been planning too. It started with a call from her father, Richard Pemberton, whose family had owned half of Portland's waterfront for 3 generations. "Julian, we need to talk. My office, 1 hour." Richard's office was in a building his grandfather had constructed in 1923, all dark wood and leather furniture designed to intimidate people who didn't belong to the right clubs or attend the right schools. I'd always felt uncomfortable there, which had been the point. But today was different. Today, I walked in with my own agenda. Richard was behind his massive desk, looking like a judge about to deliver a final verdict. Emily was sitting in one of the client chairs, her eyes red from crying, but her expression determined. Next to her was Victoria Hartwell, Emily's boss, and a man I didn't recognize wearing an expensive suit. "Julian," Richard began, "I think we can all agree that this situation has gotten out of hand." "I agree completely," I said, taking the remaining chair. "Emily's affair has created quite a mess." Richard's face darkened. "That's not what I meant, and you know it. Your public humiliation of my daughter was cruel and unnecessary." "What would you have preferred, Richard? That I pretend not to know about her relationship with Derek Halston? That I continued to be made a fool of while she conducted her affair with my money and in my house? The unknown man leaned forward. Mr. Carter, I'm James Morrison, representing the interests of the Halston family. We are prepared to make you a very generous offer to resolve this situation quietly. What kind of offer? $500,000, cash, in exchange for your agreement to stop discussing the relationship between Emily and Derek publicly, and your cooperation in an amicable divorce proceeding. $500,000. It was more money than I'd ever seen at one time, enough to start over anywhere I wanted. It was also proof that the Halston family was desperate to make this scandal disappear. That's a generous offer, I said, but I'm afraid you're misunderstanding the situation. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app. I've been recording this conversation, by the way. Maine is a one-party consent state, so that's perfectly legal. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. You see, I continued, you're all operating under the assumption that I want something from you. Money, a quiet divorce, an apology. But what I actually want is for Emily to experience the consequences of her choices. Emily finally spoke up. Julian, please, we can work this out. What happened between Derek and me, it was a mistake. I was confused. I was scared about our future. Emily, I interrupted, 3 months ago, you texted Derek a photo of our bedroom with the caption, "Can't wait to show you where I sleep." That's not confusion. That's premeditation. Victoria Hartwell cleared her throat. Mr. Carter, regardless of personal grievances, Emily is a valued employee of our firm. This public scandal is affecting her ability to do her job. Then perhaps you should have considered that before Emily used her corporate credit card to pay for hotel rooms where she conducted her affair. I have the receipts, by the way. Would you like me to forward them to your firm's ethics committee? The silence stretched out for almost a minute. Finally, Richard spoke again. What do you want, Julian? I want Emily to understand that actions have consequences. I want Derek to learn that other people's marriages aren't his playground. I want all of you to realize that the quiet, boring architect you've been condescending to for 7 years is a lot more capable than you assumed. I stood up to leave, then turned back. Oh, and Emily, Derek's engaged. To someone else. Has been for 6 months. I thought you should know. Emily's face went white. That's impossible. I pulled out my phone and showed her a screenshot from Derek's private social media account, the one he thought was hidden from his main life. Photos of him with a beautiful brunette in New York, captions about wedding planning and finding the perfect venue. Derek Halston is engaged to Catherine Mills, daughter of the Mills banking family. They've been together for 3 years. You weren't his girlfriend, Emily. You were his entertainment while he was stuck in boring old Portland for work. Emily looked like she was going to be sick. Richard looked furious. Victoria Hartwell looked like she was calculating how quickly she could distance the firm from this disaster. The engagement announcement is going to be in the New York Times Society pages next Sunday, I continued. I'm sure it will make very interesting reading for everyone who's been following our little drama. I walked toward the door, then paused for one final revelation. Emily, you should also know that Marina has been feeding me information about your activities for weeks. She's the one who told me about your corporate credit card usage. She's also the one who's been positioning herself to take over your clients while you've been distracted by your affair. Emily gasped. Marina's been planning to push you out of the firm for months. Your affair just gave her the perfect opportunity. In fact, I believe she's meeting with your biggest client right now, explaining how she can provide better service during this difficult transition period. I left them sitting in stunned silence and walked out into the bright October afternoon. My phone was buzzing with calls and texts, but I ignored them all. Instead, I drove to Murphy's pub, where Riley was waiting with a beer and a huge grin. Please tell me you recorded that whole meeting, he said. Every word. And the thing about Derek being engaged? Completely true. Mark found the information yesterday. Apparently, Derek's been living a double life. Serious relationship in New York, casual affairs wherever his work takes him. Riley shook his head in amazement. Emily really had no idea what she was getting into, did she? Emily thought she was trading up. Better-looking guy, more money, more excitement. What she didn't realize was that she was just another temporary distraction for someone who never had any intention of leaving his real life for her. My phone rang. It was Mark. "You need to see this," he said. "Emily just posted something on social media. It's... wow." I opened Instagram to find a long, rambling post from Emily's account. She was trying to control the narrative, painting herself as the victim of a manipulative husband and a deceptive lover. She was claiming that I had been emotionally abusive, that Derek had promised to leave his fiancée, that everyone had betrayed her. But the post was desperate, defensive, and full of details that only made her look worse. She was confirming the affair, admitting to the deception, and revealing information about Derek's engagement that made her look like a naive fool. The comments were brutal. Even her supporters were telling her to delete the post and get off social media. "She's in full panic mode," Riley observed, reading over my shoulder. "This is what desperation looks like. This is what happens when someone who's never faced consequences suddenly has to deal with the results of their choices," I corrected. "Emily's spent her whole life having other people clean up her mistakes. She doesn't know how to handle a situation where money and connections can't fix the problem." My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Dorsey. "Emily's at the house again. She's screaming at the door. Should I call the police?" "No," I texted back. "Just keep watching. This is almost over." I finished my beer and headed home, ready for the final act of this drama. Emily had played every card she had. Her family's money, her firm's influence, her lover's resources, her friends' support. She'd tried threats, bribes, manipulation, and public sympathy. None of it had worked, because she'd fundamentally misunderstood the game we were playing. Emily thought this was about winning and losing, about who had more power or better connections. But this was never about winning. This was about consequences. Emily had made choices, and now she was going to live with the results of those choices, just like everyone else in the world. As I pulled into my driveway, I could see Emily's BMW parked across the street. She was sitting in the driver's seat, staring at the house we'd shared for 7 years, probably trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so fast. I walked up to my front door, unlocked it, and went inside without looking in her direction. I had blueprints to review, a business to run, and a life to rebuild. Emily's part in that life was over. The next morning brought the kind of October day that makes living in Maine worthwhile. Crisp air, brilliant blue sky, and the maple trees in full autumn glory. I was drinking coffee on my front porch when Sophie's car pulled into my driveway. She got out slowly, like she was approaching a dangerous animal. Sophie looked different than I'd ever seen her. No makeup, hair in a messy ponytail, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt instead of her usual carefully curated outfit. "Julian," she said, stopping at the bottom of my porch steps. "Can we talk?" "About what?" "About Emily, about what you're doing to her." I gestured to the empty chair beside me. Sophie climbed the steps and sat down, but she looked like she wanted to run. "Emily's in bad shape," she said. "Really bad. She's been staying at my place since you changed the locks, and she's not handling this well." "How is she handling it?" "She's not sleeping, she's not eating, she's obsessing over social media comments and checking to see if Derek's called. She's talking about hiring a private investigator to find dirt on you, about suing you for emotional distress. Julian, I'm worried she's going to do something stupid." I sipped my coffee and watched Mrs. Dorsey pretend to sweep her front walk while obviously listening to our conversation. Sophie, Emily made her choices. She chose to have an affair, she chose to give me an ultimatum, she chose to underestimate what would happen if I found out about her betrayal. I didn't force her to do any of those things. But the public humiliation was Emily's idea. She's the one who wanted a public proposal, who insisted on the expensive restaurant, who built her whole identity around social media and public image. She created the stage for her own downfall. Sophie was quiet for a moment, staring out at the street. Finally, she spoke again. "There's something else. Emily asked me to give you a message." "What message?" "She says she's going to destroy you. She's going to tell everyone that you were abusive, that you manipulated her, that you drove her to have an affair. She's going to make you the villain in this story." I almost laughed. "Sophie, do you know what Emily's problem is?" "What?" "She still thinks this is a story she can control. She thinks if she just finds the right narrative, the right spin, she can make herself the victim and me the villain. But this isn't a story, Sophie. These are consequences." I pulled out my phone and opened the folder where I'd saved all of Emily's text messages, social media posts, and digital evidence. Emily spent months planning to leave me. She documented her affair. She plotted with her friends. She used our shared resources to facilitate her betrayal. She created a digital trail that proves premeditation, deception, and fraud. If she wants to make this a public battle about who's the victim, I have 3 months of evidence that will destroy any narrative she tries to create. Sophie looked at the phone screen and her face went pale. "Julian, you can't seriously be planning to release all of that." "I don't have to release it, Sophie. Emily's doing my work for me. Every time she opens her mouth, every time she posts on social media, every time she tries to play the victim, she reveals more about what she actually did. She's destroying herself, and I'm just watching it happen." My phone buzzed with a call from Mark. I answered it on speaker. "Julian, you need to know what's happening at Hartwell & Associates. My friend Dave says Emily didn't show up for work today, and Marina's been in meetings with partners all morning. Word is, they're discussing Emily's future with the firm." "What kind of discussions?" "The kind that end with security escorting you out of the building. Apparently, the corporate credit card issue was worse than anyone realized. Emily charged over $15,000 in personal expenses to the firm, including hotels, restaurants, and shopping trips with Derek." Sophie gasped. I wasn't surprised. Emily had always been careless with money, especially when it wasn't hers. "There's more," Mark continued. "Derek's father called the managing partner this morning. The Halston family is threatening to pull their business from the firm if Emily remains employed there. They're claiming she's a security risk and a liability to their reputation." Emily was being systematically abandoned by everyone who'd once supported her. Her lover had disappeared. Her employer was cutting ties. Her friends were distancing themselves, and her family's influence couldn't protect her from the consequences of her own documented actions. After I hung up, Sophie sat in silence for several minutes. "I need to ask you something," she finally said. "And I need you to be honest with me." "Okay." "Is this about revenge, or is this about justice?" It was a good question, and it deserved an honest answer. "Sophie, 3 months ago, Emily and her friends, including you, sat around planning how to destroy my life. You discussed how to maximize her share of our assets, how to paint me as the problem, how to make sure she came out ahead in a divorce. You treated my life, my feelings, and my future like they were obstacles to be overcome." Sophie looked uncomfortable, but she didn't deny it. "Emily didn't just cheat on me," I continued. "She planned to betray me, humiliate me, and take everything I'd worked for. She was going to leave me with nothing and make me grateful for it. So when you ask if this is about revenge or justice, I'd say it's about proportional response." "But she's suffering." "Sophie, Emily is experiencing the natural consequences of her choices. She's not suffering because I'm cruel. She's suffering because actions have results, and she never learned that lesson." Sophie stood up to leave, then turned back one more time. "What happens now?" "Now Emily learns to live with the choices she made, just like everyone else in the world." After Sophie left, I went inside and called my lawyer. It was time to file for divorce, and I wanted to make sure everything was done correctly and legally. Emily had taught me the importance of documentation, and I intended to apply that lesson thoroughly. By afternoon, the divorce papers were filed, the house was legally secured, and Emily's access to our shared accounts was officially terminated. I'd also taken the precaution of changing the locks on my office and alerting building security that Emily was not authorized to access my workplace. As I was leaving the lawyer's office, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Carter? This is Detective Sarah Mills with the Portland Police Department. We've received a complaint about harassment and stalking. I'd like to speak with you about your relationship with Emily Carter." Emily had called the police. She was trying to make me the aggressor, to create a narrative where she was the victim of an abusive husband who was stalking and harassing her. "Detective Mills, I'd be happy to speak with you. Should I come to the station, or would you prefer to meet somewhere else? Actually, could you meet me at Murphy's Pub in an hour? I find people are more comfortable talking in casual settings." Murphy's Pub. Detective Mills had done her homework and knew about my connection to Riley. She was also smart enough to realize that Emily's story probably didn't add up. An hour later, I was sitting across from Detective Mills, a woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that comes from years of dealing with people's lies. "Mr. Carter, I'm going to be direct with you. Emily Carter claims you've been stalking her, harassing her, and threatening her. She says you've been following her, taking pictures of her, and making her feel unsafe. Detective Mills, I haven't seen Emily since the day I changed the locks on my house. I haven't called her, texted her, or attempted to contact her in any way. In fact, I have evidence that she's been the one attempting to contact me." I showed her my phone, with dozens of missed calls and unanswered texts from Emily, including several that could be interpreted as threatening. I also have security footage from my home showing Emily attempting to break into my house twice in the past week, and witness statements from neighbors who can confirm that she's been parked outside my home for hours at a time. Detective Mills looked through the evidence, her expression growing more skeptical of Emily's claims with each piece of documentation. "Mr. Carter, would you be willing to provide a formal statement about your interactions with Emily Carter?" "Absolutely, but, Detective, there's something else you should know. Emily Carter has been conducting an extramarital affair for 3 months, using fraudulent means to finance that affair, and she's currently facing termination from her job for misuse of corporate resources. She's desperate, and desperate people sometimes make false accusations." Detective Mills closed her notebook and looked at me directly. "Mr. Carter, I've been doing this job for 20 years. I can usually tell the difference between someone who's telling the truth and someone who's trying to manipulate the system. Emily Carter's story has more holes than a screen door, and your evidence is thorough and consistent. So what happens now? Now I go back and have another conversation with Ms. Carter, and I suggest that she might want to focus on rebuilding her life instead of trying to destroy yours." As Detective Mills left, Riley came over with a beer and sat down across from me. "False police report?" he asked. "Looks like it." That was stupid of her. Emily's not thinking clearly. She's in full panic mode, trying anything that might work, but she's making the same mistake she's been making all along. Which is? She's still trying to win a game, instead of accepting that the game is over. I finished my beer and headed